America, in the geographic terms we understand today, was populated by at least 50 million people before Columbus's arrival. The illnesses his European explorers brought with them, specifically smallpox, weakened those Indian societies, killed off entire civilizations, but did not end the Indian history of the American continent. Archaeologists date the Siberian Clovis people's migration to present-day United States to roughly 11,000 years ago. It came over a frozen Bering Strait, which is the body of water that connects present-day Russia and the Aleutian Islands of Alaska. DNA evidence also points to small-scale European immigration long before Columbus. The most organized early American society before Columbus was the Incan Empire of Peru, a culture which had paved roads and a shared single government as early as 10,000 BC. The Mayans had language, a system of numbers, and a calendar by 1000 BC. Other tribes, including the Aztecs, built up modern-day Mexico City by 1300 AD, 200 years before Columbus's arrival. That city featured 100,000 people, public schools, a full-fledged military, medicinal practices, and a system of slavery. It's worth noting that many religions of Mesoamerica featured human sacrifice. The Indians of the North, the Great Plains, the Southwest, the Pacific Northwest, are varied peoples with unique lifestyles and societal organizations, and these people are still here. The Inuits of the North, the woodland Indians of the Northeast, and the farmers of the plains all existed on variations of hunting, fishing, gathering, and agriculture. They all featured different patterns of gender relationships. Europeans began to look west seriously at the end of the 15th century. They were far too disorganized, weak, and divided before then. Although a handful of explorers had glimpsed the western shores of the Americas and survived to tell the tale back in Europe. But beginning in the 1490s, three reasons compelled the more adventurous to take to the seas and to explore the West. Number one, they needed more room to grow after European populations rebounded after the Black Death. Number two, European governments and monarchies sought the untapped minerals and resources. They wanted wealth, and they'd heard about it from these explorers. And finally, number three, they sought a shorter trade route to the riches of the East, and they believed that India lay westward. They thought by going west, they would connect directly to the places of the East, India, China, places like that. They didn't think anything was between here and there. Christopher Columbus, an Italian who worked for the powerful Portuguese Navy, got the Spanish government to back a risky expedition in 1492. The idea was to reach Asian lands over water by traveling west and to secure an easier trade route with those nations in the process, because overland trail to the east to places like India was very, very difficult. It's much easier to go over water, but then you have to go around Africa. So they thought if we take to the water and head west, we can get there very, very quickly. In 10 weeks, he hit the Bahamas and thought he was on an Asian island. He pushed on to Cuba and thought he was in China. Only on his third trip to the Americas did Columbus realize he was in a totally new world. By 1550, the Spanish Navy had circumnavigated the globe and explored the west coast of the modern United States. Only then did they begin to think of the Americas less as an obstacle to Asia and more as a valuable resource in and of themselves. First, though, they had to deal with the people already populating the American continent. Spanish policies of subjugation were supported by ideas of natives as savages, inferior in race and culture to the peoples of Europe. The first real conflict in the New World came during Spain's explorations of South America. Hernan Cortés in 1518 tried to seize the treasures of the Aztecs and the Emperor Montezuma. His 600-man army failed to take their gold, but their smallpox eventually weakened the Aztecs and made a later conquest possible. Cortés was the first of the brutal conquistadors, or Spanish conquerors of the New World. Those conquistadors were interested mostly in the mines of the New World. For 300 years, 10 times more gold and silver came from the New World from those mines than anywhere else. Other Spanish explorers, though, hoped to spread religion and Spanish culture to the New World, to the peoples, and created agricultural kingdoms in the New World. Collectively, Spanish explorers claimed Florida by 1565, and they took Santa Fe by 1605. They converted millions to both Catholicism and to slavery, and they settled outposts with native/mixed populations all over the New World. So these European explorers at first find the Americas, figure out that it's not Asia, think of it as an impediment, like, oh, we have all this land in the way. Very quickly, they realize that there's something valuable in the Americas, but they encounter Native Americans who they think are savages, and so they try to steal their money, but they also try to convert them and convert them to Catholicism and into slaves. On the whole, early European and Native exchanges were biological and cultural. Some of those exchanges were beneficial, but some were catastrophic. Europeans brought diseases, sugar, bananas, pigs, cows, and horses to the New World for the first time. The Spanish brought back corn, beans, tomatoes, and potatoes back to Europe. The population mixed, changing the makeup of the Americas and forever altering the culture and the language of North, Central, and South America. So these early European explorers really sort of set the stage for what these continents will be. When I say the New World, of course, I'm referring to sort of North, South, and Central America. Though the Spanish were the first conquerors of the Americas, a full half of the immigrants to the Americas in the 3 centuries between the years 1500 and 1800, of course, were Africans. North Africa was largely civilized by European standards by the year 1100 AD. They were mostly Muslims, they had a strong trade-based economy, and they organized in matrilineal societies, which means the wife was at the head of the family. Their own slave trade, where criminals of many races were often sold into hard labor for a period of time, eventually begot the forced deportation of millions of blacks to the Americas. Once Europeans discovered they could buy slave labor in North Africa, they overwhelmed and distorted the slave market, and soon not only criminals were forced into servitude. Over time, many hundreds of thousands of innocent Africans were kidnapped and sold into the transatlantic slave economy into the Americas. Not unlike Spain, the island nation of England sought permanent colonies for land, and the spirit of mercantilism drove their exploration. The theory of mercantilism argues that nations have a responsibility to grow and prosper through land and resource acquisition. Colonies then would funnel money into the nation and ensure military strength against other naval powers. As Spain increasingly threatened England on the high seas as their navies came into conflict, the notion of distant and profitable English colonies became all the more attractive. So Europe, when they start to think about the Americas, they think, well, we can put our people on and lay claim to this land. We can claim the resources. We can create like a small Spain or a small England overseas, and we can tax them or have them send their goods to us. We can have these profitable little outposts all across the globe, and that'll help us be more powerful against our European rivals. So European conflicts play out all across the world once they start to explore and conquer these foreign lands. Internally, religious and ideological turmoil within England turned reformers into Puritans or separatists, people against the religious order of England. Anglicanism was the official religion of England, and people that didn't practice that specific brand of Christianity were forced essentially to leave. Religious nonconformists began to seek a way out of their persecution. Their first foray, the establishment of the colony of Ireland, served as a model for the eventual colonizations in the Americas. During the same time period, the Protestant Reformation and Calvinism movements encouraged many English people to want to become missionaries abroad. And for the first time, ordinary people had a reason to get on a ship and start over half a world away. And so these religious movements, they dictate that your good acts reflect well on you in as far as the afterlife. You have control over where you're headed, heaven or hell. So the better a Christian you are, the greater the likelihood you're going to get into heaven. So as Western explorers start to plot out these new lands and conquer these new lands, people are drawn to the sort of new Christian ideology that says the more you do to spread the gospel, the better chance you'll have to get into heaven. So people get on these ships and they start to try to spread the word to the Americas. The English eventually established their first permanent colony at Jamestown in 1607 after 30 years of failed attempts, including the lost colony at Roanoke, North Carolina. The French and Dutch, not wanting to be left out, laid claim to their own colonies in the New World. France laid claim to Quebec, which is in Canada, and the Dutch created a trading outpost on Manhattan Island, which is modern-day New York City. The French explorers created strong alliances with the native peoples they encountered, unlike other nations, to make fur trading more effective and peaceful. Voyagers were Frenchmen who married native women and adopted native languages and cultural practices. They existed as cultural go-betweens for the people and the governments of France. All other nations tended to treat native peoples as savages, which obviously created hundreds and hundreds of years of conflict. By the 17th century, the stage is set for a global population shift that will change the world forever.